You know the drill. You go for your routine blood work, get the report back, and the doctor says, everything looks normal.
And that feels like good news, right? But it does make you wonder what normal really means, especially for something like sodium levels.
Exactly. Because that standard range, it's often seen as this, wide safe zone.
But what if being, say, on the higher end of normal isn't quite as risk-free as we've always assumed?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this. We've been doing a deep dive into source material on a pretty significant new study. It really challenges some common ideas about health metrics and, maybe surprisingly, about hydration.
Right.
So our mission here is to pull out the key insights from this research, specifically how hydration, which can be reflected in those high normal sodium readings, might impact your heart health long term.
And the source material points to this really impressive study from Bar-Ilan University. It was just published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology.
Impressive how?
Well, they dug into a massive data set. We're talking electronic health records for over 400,000 healthy adults in Israel. And they tracked them for 20 years, between 2003 and 2023.
Wow, okay. 20 years, 400,000 people. That scale definitely gives the findings some weight.
Absolutely.
And just a baseline, the traditional normal for serum sodium, it's usually cited as, 135 to 146 millimol?
Yeah, mmol, that's just the standard concentration unit, and we're used to thinking anywhere in there is perfectly fine.
But this study seems to suggest, maybe it's a bit more complicated.
It certainly does. The source highlights that even within that accepted normal range, certain sub-ranges showed links to increased risk.
Like what?
So for healthy adults with sodium levels between 140 and 142 millimol still well within normal, remember the study found a 13% higher risk of developing hypertension.
Wait, a 13% higher risk? Just for being in that upper normal band? That's quite striking from the data.
It is, and the source indicates it didn't stop there. The risks seem to climb higher. Yeah, the study found that people with sodium levels above 143 millimol low, which, depending on the lab's specific cutoff, might still be considered normal, close to that 146 upper limit.
Right.
Those levels were linked to an even higher risk, a 29% increased risk of hypertension, and also a 20% higher risk of heart failure.
Wow. So just having sodium concentration creep up towards the top end of normal could, according to this study, quietly increase your risk for pretty serious issues later on.
Exactly. And the source notes that almost 60% of the healthy adults they studied fell into these potentially higher risk sodium ranges. That's a huge chunk of the population potentially affected.
That really underscores the public health relevance, doesn't it?
It does. And the researchers, including Professor Jonathan Rabinowitz from Bar-Ilan and Dr. Natalia Dmitrieva from NIH, they really tried to isolate this connection.
Oh.
They controlled for a lot of other factors, things like age, sex, BMI, blood pressure, smoking, even potassium levels. They also specifically excluded people with existing conditions that mess with water balance. They really wanted to zero in on this sodium concentration link.
Which naturally brings us back to hydration.
Yeah.
Because higher sodium concentration often means lower overall hydration.
Precisely. And Professor Binowitz, according to the source, suggests these findings really point to hydration as a critical factor in preventing chronic disease. Maybe one we overlook too often.
So he's framing it like a simple blood test result could be an early warning.
Kind of, yeah. He suggests it could identify people who might benefit from, pretty straightforward lifestyle changes, like simply making sure you drink enough fluids to help keep that blood sodium concentration diluted.
Makes sense.
He stresses that this study provides pretty compelling evidence that just staying well hydrated might genuinely help lower the long-term risk of hypertension and heart failure.
Okay, so pulling it all together from the source material, we have this large 20-year study, over 400,000 adults, carefully controlled. And it suggests that even blood sodium at the higher end of normal,
specifically those 140, 142 millimol and the above 143 ranges.
Right. Those ranges are linked to significantly higher risks for hypertension, 13% and 29% higher, respectively, and for the highest group, a 20% increased risk of heart failure.
It definitely nudges us to maybe reconsider what normal really means for long-term risk. Suggests there might be a gradient, even within that supposedly safe zone.
And it strongly backs up that perspective from Professor Rabinowitz, highlighted in the source. Hydration isn't just about thirst. It could be a critical, maybe underestimated part of preventative health.
Yeah, the sheer scale and the careful methods of this study really lend weight to that idea.
It raises a pretty fundamental question about how we interpret those routine lab numbers we get back.
Definitely. What insights might be hiding in plain sight beyond just everything looks fine?
Absolutely. So how might this research change the way you think about those simple health markers next time you see them? And perhaps, how much more vital are those basic habits, like just staying properly hydrated, even if your labs are technically normal? Something to think about.